Hi, everyone. My name is Beth Basu, and I'm excited to talk with you a little more today about healthy eating tips for kids and families. I'm a parishioner at Ascension, but I'm also a registered and licensed dietitian and a certified health coach. I have experience working with pediatric populations, adult populations, seniors, and everyone in between. I currently work in a sales role at a digital health company, but I've worked at Children's Hospital in the past, and during that time I worked a good bit with kids with eating disorders all across the spectrum of undereating, overeating, and specific disease concerns as well. So I'm happy to share some tidbits and advice with you today. I do want to give a little caveat that this is not intended to be medical advice. Your child may have unique issues around food tolerance, allergies, or specific dietary needs related to their health. And so please do follow up with your doctor if your child is experiencing any acute symptoms, things like vomiting, gagging, diarrhea. This is more just general information and not specific to your child. I also like to offer, if you would like to talk about your individual child or family's issues, please feel free to find my contact information in the church directory. I'm happy to sit down and talk with you more in depth about your family's needs. As you can see, I have just about 6 slides prepared today to talk over. This will last about 30 minutes. And so let's jump in. I'm going to see if I can turn my camera off in order to focus a little bit more. All right. So first, I'd like to start with a little overview of just general nutrition and helpful ways to think about structuring your family's meals. I encourage you to check out the website choosemyplate.gov. This is provided to us by the USDA, and it's a really simple, easy to understand model for you to plan meals, but also to teach your children and family about the basics of healthy eating. So you can see in the picture, this method of healthy eating guides us to make half our plate fruits and vegetables. This is sometimes a little harder to do at breakfast. We all are a little habit driven in our morning meal. And so you don't have to think of this every single meal, but maybe start with your lunches and dinners and think about adding more fruits and vegetables to your plate. The remainder of the plate is split between protein and grains. These are the starchy foods. We think of pasta, bread, rice. When you can, the guidance is to make these grains whole, things like whole wheat bread, brown rice, whole wheat pasta, or gluten-free substitutes as well for those of your kids who are sensitive to wheat and gluten. And then similarly, many of us are sensitive to dairy, so milk substitutes are just fine. If you prefer almond milk, soy milk, oat milk, those all make great substitutes. And when it comes to proteins, the guidance we're given is to vary our choices there. The healthier choices are lighter meats like chicken and pork, as opposed to red meats like beef. And you can also think here about non-meat protein sources, things like beans, peanut butter and nuts, and even some vegetarian substitutes like tofu or veggie burgers can be great choices there. Other advice given to us when we're thinking about this model is to focus on variety and amount when we're thinking about these foods. That can be challenging, especially if you have some picky eaters at your house, and we'll talk about that later in this time together. But some things that you can do is allowing your kids to have some input in the foods that you purchase, whether they help you make a grocery list, pick out recipes, plan meals. That can be a great way to learn about other fruits, vegetables, and foods that your child is willing to try. Overall, I'll talk about this more as we go through, but the more that you can choose foods and beverages to bring into your home that have less saturated fat, sodium, and added sugars, that's better. Typically, added salt, sugar, and fat is found in foods that are more processed. So my guidance to you is to choose as many foods as you can that are in their natural form. How I like to say, eat your foods the way God made them, the way they come out of the ground. So if you can do things like purchasing frozen or fresh broccoli instead of a sauced broccoli dish, that is sometimes more not only healthy, but more appealing to your children when foods are simply prepared. As you embark on thinking about how you might want to change your family's eating habits too, I'll encourage you to just start small. It's impossible for any of us to overhaul all of our family's habits overnight. So start with just one or two things that you might like to do differently. And as you make these changes, it's important that they're changes for the whole family so that you're supporting healthy eating for everybody and not just singling out one person in your household. So check out choosemyplate.gov. There's tons of resources here that you can use with your kids too, things like coloring sheets and online games and word finds. So it's a fun way to get your kids involved in learning about healthy eating, which is another thing that can help them be a little more adventurous with their eating, as we'll talk about here in a moment. All right, so as we're talking about specifically feeding our kids and our families, I have some general tips here that can help you, whether you're dealing with a picky eater or great eaters. One of the biggest pieces of advice I can give you is to at least minimally plan ahead what your family is going to be eating from day to day. We're all guilty of this, but we know we are going to get hungry three times a day or more, but at least breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But it's all too easy for us to not plan ahead and then be sort of overwhelmed with hunger and then find ourselves scrambling for something to eat. And it's difficult to make healthy choices when we're under pressure like that. So you can keep your meals really simple. They don't have to be fancy or ornate. But do try to sit down at least once or twice a week and map out a few days worth of meals, and then make a grocery list to make sure you have the items that you intend to eat on hand. And keeping it really simple will help here. Pizza makes a fine meal, as does chicken nuggets and canned peaches. Just think back to that plate model that we looked at on the last slide, and do your best to arm your household with a variety of different fruit options, vegetable options, healthy protein options, and even whole grains and non-whole grains. If you have lots of choices in your pantry, it's easier to put together those simple meals. And again, dishes that are not sauced or combined foods can often be more appealing to kids. So they'll be more receptive often if they can identify the food that is on their plate and keep those pretty simple. I'll tell you that sauces and dips can help a lot here. I have one picky eater in my household as well, and she'll eat many vegetables that I put in front of her if I give her, as strange as it sounds, a small dish of maple syrup to dip them in. And so that condiment goes a long way towards helping her open her mind to new vegetables that she may have not seen before. So it's okay to offer ketchup, ranch, whatever dip your child prefers to help them eat those things. When we're thinking about what foods we're bringing into the house, this probably sounds simple, but an easy strategy that you might try is to limit purchasing items that you don't want your family to be eating. So make a point to only bring into your home those things that are okay for your child to eat, and then they won't feel like food is forbidden to them or that they have anything off limits. So that's a great strategy, and it helps us all reframe treat foods as treats. Sometimes if we have these foods at easy access, it's all too simple to grab them for a snack or after a meal. But if you don't have junk foods in the house, then they're not so easy to eat, and it helps us reframe those as special foods to be eaten at special times and not necessarily everyday foods. Another general tip I'll offer you all for your families is to try and sit down to eat together at least one meal each day. Every family is different, so it might not always be dinner, which was traditionally what we think of as the evening meal. It might be that breakfast is the meal that's most convenient for you all to be together. But it's important that we have conversation with our family members about the day. And so sometimes you can share something that made you laugh or what you did for fun. EYCers, you guys are familiar with Happy Crappy, and we do that around our dinner table, sharing something that was good about our day and something that was hard about our day. Other conversation starter ideas include giving each family member the spotlight to share their highlight. You can rotate the spotlight day by day. You can also use icebreakers here. So you can ask your family things like, if we lived in a zoo, what animal would you each be and why? Or if you could have one superpower, what would it be and why? The idea around sitting down as a family and talking about things other than food is to help take some of the pressure off of eating. If you have a picky eater, then it's easy to fall into a cycle with your picky eater of meal times being pretty stressful. You enter the meal with some anxiety about whether your kid's going to eat or not, and they're anticipating your anxiety. So sometimes they will act up, for lack of a better word, at the table because they're inciting that reaction out of you. So this stress at mealtime is not about the food at all, but really about what your child's developmentally struggling with in terms of independence and making choices. And I'll get into that more on the next slide, but think about this, how your family interacts with each other around mealtime. And that might be, where you want to focus, not so much on what you're bringing into the house or what you're putting on your kids' plates, but your interactions and your behavior around mealtime. So I know this gets into some kind of touchy topics, but really eating for kids and nutrition is not always so much about nutrition, but other times it's about family behaviors and interactions. So again, we'll get into more on that on the next slide, but I am going to share some different resources as I move through the rest of my presentation and want you to have those. So you can see here, the first link is to the choosemyplate.gov website. They have some fabulous strategies here on grocery shopping, meal planning, keeping it low cost and simple. So check out those eating healthy on a budget links and the other links on the Choose My Plate site. Eatright.org is a website that is published by my professional organization, the American College of Nutrition and Dietetics. So they have a whole section for kids and parents that includes meal ideas, cooking tips, ways to get your kids active in the kitchen and thinking about healthy eating and trying new foods. Check out that website. And then as we get into talking more about healthy eating, picky eating, if you do have a picky eater, I'd highly encourage you to check out the Ellen Satter Institute. She has a myriad of resources that can help us as parents encourage healthy eating behaviors in our children, as well as tackling some eating related behaviors that your kids may be struggling with. So again, if you have a picky eater, definitely check out that last link. All right, so let's dive a little bit deeper into picky eaters. I'm going to start with some just general discussion before I get into the points on this slide here. I know that this can be a very struggling issue when you have a picky eater. And often this bleeds over, not just from meal times, but into snacks, can bleed into your child, sneaking food in between meals, as well as just general stress in the home. So I'll again remind you that I've had a lot of experience dealing with this professionally, as well as personally in my own home. So I know how hard it can be. Some of the tips that I'll share are to try new foods at home rather than out in a restaurant, and give your child tons of time through this process. Research shows that kids need to see a food oftentimes 15 or 20 times before they ever taste it, just to get used to having it on the family table or on their plate is okay. A lot of us were raised in environments where we had to eat. We were forced to try everything, or we had the clean plate club. I grew up in a household like that. But when you're struggling with a healthy eater, it's important that they not feel forced to eat. So as you're beginning in this process of encouraging your kid to try a new food, start by having them just put a piece of the food on their plate. They don't have to eat it at first. Just let it sit on the plate. And that will help to increase their comfort level just around being around new foods. The fact that you're going to allow them to have it on their plate but not eat it will begin to remove some of the pressure that your child may have felt up to this point around eating. So that's really the basis of this whole process we're going to talk through, is removing that pressure on feeding from your child and helping them build the trust in themselves to know how much they want to eat and what they want to eat. So the second tip I'll give you, the second bullet point, is to offer these new foods one at a time, simply prepared, as I mentioned earlier, and offer them along with other things your child likes. So if you're going to have a new vegetable on the table for dinner tonight, you should probably try to choose a protein and a grain and maybe a fruit that you know your child will already eat. If a child's plate is filled with all new foods, they're sometimes overwhelmed with the newness that they shut down. So give them some comfort level, give them some familiar foods so they know they're going to have something at the meal they will enjoy and be able to eat, and that will take away some of that pressure. Making mealtime fun, as I talked about on the last slide, with some conversation and some interaction is very helpful. It should also be a time when you remove distractions. So try to not bring your telephone to the table, your cell phone. If you generally eat with a TV on in the background, just try shutting it off one meal per day so that you guys can focus on each other, and don't talk about the food on the table. Don't talk about whether your kid's going to eat it or not, or even whether they like it or not. I like to give this example, but when you put the food on the table, you really want to look away at that point and don't even look at the food or what's on your child's plate or how they're eating. Make the conversation about other things so that the child doesn't feel that pressure to eat. In between meals, snacks are fine. Children have little bellies and they do get hungry frequently. So snacks are absolutely okay and often a necessary part of your child's day in order to maintain their energy levels. But it's important to time the snacks that are offered midway in between the meals so that they come to the table at mealtime hungry. And you should use snack time also to try to get nutrition into your kids. So make snacks come from the basic food groups that we saw on that choose your plate model, not so much a snack food. So if you're looking at a food and you can't exactly tell what food group it falls into, that's probably a junk food. Things like chips are not the best snack option. But if you can aim to have a fruit or a vegetable in your snack, as well as a grain or a protein, that's a great way to get nutrition into your child throughout the day and help fill in the gaps when it comes to meeting the intake for each of those food groups. Certainly, we all know a child needs to be hungry in order to eat. And so that's the point of having structured meals and snacks. And when possible, try to not let your child eat between those meal and snack times. So you plan those out, time them throughout the day so that you're offering 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks but they're all 2 to 3 hours apart, so that your child comes to the table hungry. Now, if you have a child who's been a picky eater for some years, your child's going to have some pretty extreme food issues, and we call these food selectivity. And they've probably experienced so much conflict and anxiety about eating over the previous years or months that those negative feelings can sometimes get in the way of their natural awareness of hunger and need for food. So this may take some time. So again, be patient with your child and give them not days, but weeks and months to get on a new schedule. At the same time, if you've been dealing with a picky eater for months and years, you as a parent probably have so much anxiety and upset that it may be difficult for you to hold steady with these guidelines. So to help both you and the child recover from this kind of deadlock you've been in at mealtime, your child needs to know 2 things. He needs to know that A, there will be food offered at regular intervals that he's comfortable with. And 2, the second thing, he needs to be reassured that he doesn't have to eat. For you to recover from this kind of deadlock you may have been experiencing, you need to be reassured that it's okay to offer your kid familiar foods that are approachable to them. You don't have to limit the menu, though, just to those foods that he or she readily accepts. There is a happy medium between giving your child foods they're familiar with and working new foods into your menu at the same time. So that can be done, but trying the new foods at home, offering them one at a time and pretty simply prepared, along with those things your child likes, and then taking the pressure off of them that they don't have to eat it will go a long way for you. So you can really take some of the pressure out of meal times by following these recommendations I've given you, meanwhile being considerate with your meal planning and what you put on the table. But it just takes a little thinking ahead and changing your approach and weaving in some of these new strategies at mealtime too. So you probably need to get some encouragement right now. I've just laid a lot of heavy stuff on you. So let me do a little exercise. Put yourself in your child's shoes when it comes to eating. Understand that kids are inexperienced eaters. They live in this world where they really can't control anything at all except what they put in their mouth. And they're continually probably being offered foods that they haven't seen before. And they're experiencing pressure at the table to eat that unfamiliar food, and that overwhelms a child. At the same time, though, your kid wants to learn and grow. They want to be like their peers, and they want to eat as a, quote, normal behavior. So they see other people doing that, and they want that. But again, some of the pressure has to come off in order for them to be able to release that gridlock too, because for little people, they don't get to make any choices about anything else in their day. So mealtime can be a place where we see that determination and strong will come out. Again, because they've been living in a pattern where that behavior elicits a response from you. So as parents, we have to really change our approach first, and then our kids can begin to build trust in their own eating intuition. Once the pressure is off, you'll find that your child will push themselves along to learn and grow with food acceptance. And we just have to keep in mind that the child's having positive food acceptance behavior, it doesn't mean your child's going to eat everything. So give them some grace here. The goal for you should just be that your child can begin to participate happily in your family meals, that your kid can remain calm in the presence of unfamiliar foods, and third, that your child can pick and choose from what's available. They don't need to be made to eat. Through this whole process, your child will be provided with repeated and neutral exposure to a variety of foods, and they will slowly, ever so gradually, broaden their food repertoire. Again, it's not something that happens in 3 meals. This is a process that'll take weeks or sometimes months, but it it will work if you have some patience and take some pressure off. So I'll wrap up by covering over my last bullet point. You remember I said a few moments ago that part of this behavior is because mealtime is pretty much the only place where your kid can assert their independence. That's a natural part of growth and development. It's not abnormal at all. It's totally normal for your kid to exhibit these kinds of behaviors, and every kid will at one point or another. So the more that you can give them some choice in the meal planning and eating process, you'll see some benefit here as you work through this. So let them make some choices, and here's some ways you can do it. Let them choose the meal. Let them help you decide what tonight's dinner is going to look like. You can also let them help set the table, put plates and silverware and napkins out. You can let them help you make the grocery list. At our house, we like to sometimes play restaurant and make menus, or let the kids serve us as waiters and waitresses, and we parents sit at the table. So those can all be ways to make mealtime fun and let your child participate and have some choice. When we think about the Ellen Satter resources I was sharing with you a moment ago, the way that Ellen Satter approaches it is called a division of responsibility in feeding. Ultimately, she says, we as parents should help decide what foods come in the house and what's on the table, and then the kids should be able to make the choice about what and how much of that food they want to eat. So if you'd like to read more about that, check out her website. But again, that's a real easy way to think about it. You should avoid catering to pickiness. So don't make multiple meals for different family members. Try to plan your meal to have some options in it so that there's something that everybody likes. But if your child knows that you're willing to make a food that they want, a separate meal from the rest of the family, they will certainly work you in this way. So try to avoid catering to your picky eaters by preparing different meals for different family members. I touched on this a little on the last slide, but when you do sit down at meals and offer food to your child, divert your attention away from your child while they're eating. Try not to pressure them at all to eat, or ask them, how they're enjoying the food. Please try to take your attention away from your child and talk about other things while they're eating. As I talked about a moment ago, often this picky eating behavior is really not about the food at all. It's a learned response from your child to feeling control or unintended pressure, and a way to elicit a response from you. So the less that you respond, the less that your child will do these behaviors. Don't worry too much about how much your child is eating either. As I mentioned before, kids are pretty in tune to understanding their signs of hunger and fullness. So when your child says he is full, take that as truth and don't make him eat anymore. When we encourage our children to overeat in that way, we almost train them to ignore their signs of fullness and hunger, which can set up overeating and overweight patterns as your child grows into a teenager or a young adult. So when they say they're full, respect that, and understand in your head, if you feel like they haven't eaten enough, know that you're going to offer another snack in 2 to 3 hours that's made up of healthy foods, so your child will have a way to make up for some of that nutrition he or she may have lost. Try not to set up food as reward here either. Often when we say to a child, you can have dessert if you finish everything on your plate, we are unintentionally encouraging them to overeat. So if you're going to have a dessert, space it out far away from mealtime so that they don't see food as a reward. And again, be patient. Understand that this is going to take a lot of trial and error on your child's part and your part as we learn to trust each other and become, more in tune with ourselves. So on the other end of the spectrum from picky eating is overeating. And so I wanted to touch on this for a moment as well. Weight loss is usually not recommended for children. I would never encourage you to put your child on a diet. If you have a child who's heavier than is recommended by your pediatrician, the thing to do is to focus on weight maintenance so that we can encourage them to grow in height, so their growth velocity catches up, their height catches up with their weight, and kids grow more proportionally. But try not to ever talk about weight loss or weight with your child at all. Replace that word weight with the word health in your own vocabulary so that you can begin to focus this conversation more on eating habits than on your child's physical appearance. Along those same lines, think carefully about how you speak on your own weight and health. Please try not to talk about your own weight in front of your children or any diets or weight loss attempts that you may be following. Your child sees you as beautiful and perfect. And so if you talk about your weight as a problem, then that begins to set up some unhealthy behaviors in your child and as it relates to their own self-appearance. So think about that, replacing the word weight with the word health. Think about that for yourself too. Focusing more on your own daily habits instead of the number on the scale will probably help you have more success with changing your personal habits as well. So think about if you do need to adjust your child's eating habits for better growth velocity. Remember that any changes you make to your mealtime routines or to the foods that you bring into the home, those changes should apply to everybody in your household, not just one child. Because if you do make changes apply to only one child, that child feels like something's wrong with them or that they're being singled out. So any efforts you make around changing eating habits should apply to the whole family and be an effort that the whole family undertakes together to get healthier. And like we talked about early in the presentation, the best way to do this is by focusing on keeping healthy foods in your home. One way that you can talk about this with your kids is using the traffic light method that you see on the screen here. When I used to work at Children's of Alabama, this is the model that we used to talk with kids about foods that we can eat anytime we want, foods that we can eat in moderation, and foods that are treats that should be eaten rarely. So take a look at this spotlight way of eating, and it may be something that you use to guide your grocery shopping, your meal planning, and the way you talk about foods with your children. The basics of this model are, if we start at the bottom with the green light foods, these are really your fruits and vegetables. And these are things that your kid can eat in unlimited amounts with every meal and snack. Foods to be eaten in moderation are things like fatty meats, the simple carbohydrates, things like white bread and crackers that you see on the slide here. These things are certainly part of our natural normal diet, but we need to think back to the plate model. And as we're fixing our plates at mealtime, think about putting these foods on a quarter of the plate, again, leaving half the plate open for these green light foods, the fruits and vegetables. And then treat foods fall into the red light category. I would recommend that you start by, if these foods are a frequent part of your child's diet, start by letting your child choose one red light food per day that they can have as part of a snack or a meal. Again, not as a reward for anything, but just as a normal part of your daily routine. And then if you feel like that's still too much, you can go down to a couple of times a week. I have good success with not necessarily keeping a lot of these foods in my house, but take ice cream, for example. If your family wants to have ice cream, y'all get in the car and go to Brewster's and get ice cream. Let everybody pick their favorite flavor and enjoy it together and savor it. And this is a great way to reframe these foods as treats to be enjoyed together, at a fun time, rather than thinking of these foods as a part of our regular daily diet. And I mentioned this earlier too, but setting meal and snack times that are fairly routine at your house and timing those snacks so that they are about 2 to 3 hours in between each meal will help to provide your kids some regularity. They'll know what to expect, and they'll know that food is always going to be coming around the corner, so they are often less likely to sneak food in between meals. And when you are offering snacks in between meals, again, try to make those snacks come from the basic food groups rather than from what we think of more traditional junk foods. Lastly here, I'll invite you to consider what your child drinks every day. Often beverages can be a source of added sugar. We're not always thinking about that, but even juice, which we think of as a healthy food, can inadvertently give your child more calories than they need every day. So milk and milk substitutes, as well as water, are the best options to offer at meals and snacks. And then in between meals and snacks, water should be the main thing that your child is reaching for. If your child absolutely won't drink plain water, I'd encourage you to check out things like sugar-free drink mixes, Crystal Light. You can also try flavoring the water with slices of fruit. That can liven it up a little bit for your child. But if they're not willing to drink any kind of water as well, then those are some other products you can use to increase their familiarity with non-sugar sweetened beverages. And then finally, if this is really appealing to you and something that you want to dig deeper into, I've included a website here that can help you learn more about this stoplight way of thinking about nutrition and healthy eating that you can dig a little deeper into. All right, so I'm wrapping up. Let me share some takeaways. Again, this is a long process. Don't try to overhaul your family's eating habits overnight. If you do need to make changes, I recommend that you start by eating what you're eating now, but focus on mealtime behavior. Start by working on setting those regular meal and snack times and working on some of the conversation behavior that we talked about around meal times. And then as a next step, you can think about beginning to offer those new foods alongside familiar foods, or begin limiting the kinds of foods that you bring in your house. So takeaways first is to do what you can to reduce the pressure at the table around food and eating. Think back to that division of responsibility in feeding. Really, your job as a parent is to bring healthy food into your house and to offer it at regular intervals to your child. It is your child's job to choose what from these options on the table they're going to eat and how much they're going to eat. Avoid restricting your child. And again, making sure that your house is filled with foods you want your kids to eat will help here. Treating the treats as treats. It's quite a mouthful, but an easy way to remember it. Do use snacks to support meal times, but think of snacks as tiny meals made up of healthy choices rather than treats, and carefully time these snacks so that your child will come to the meal table hungry. And a big part of this is going to be planning ahead and grocery shopping. Use those to your advantage, whether you go to the grocery store or you use grocery delivery. Let your kid help you make the list. Let your kid help you select the foods, and even let your child help in the kitchen by simple meal preparation tasks like stirring, mixing, slicing. Those things can go a long way. And try to worry not so much about the shoulds and oughts and focus more on the habits of your family. This mealtime behavior is really much more important than whether your child gets exactly the right amount of food from each food group daily. We as humans, we don't have to eat perfectly every day. It's okay if our nutrition balances out over the course of a couple of days or weeks. If you have no idea how much you or your child should be eating. That ChooseMyPlate.gov website does have some tools where you can plug in your child's age and size and get some general guidelines about how much they should be eating from each food group each day. But again, I don't want you to focus in so much on that, as much as I'd like you to think about your mealtime behaviors, your attitude towards foods, and what you're bringing, into your home. So again, try to take away those quotas, those goals, the strictness around healthy eating, and focus more on your family's habits. I hope this has been a helpful presentation for you all. It's been a joy to talk with you guys this morning. Again, if you have more specific questions or a different issue that you're dealing with as it relates to your child, please contact me. I'd love to help you, or sit down and even have a conversation with you and your family. So thank you so much for your time and attention today. Bye-bye.